When I think of leadership and I think of the people that are with us today and just, of course, General Terry, who just preceded me, and I know that it's our heart's desire and the desire of this simulcast to raise the level of leadership until men and women around the world, all ages, the youth like Michaela, to the older people like myself, that they would really begin to carry that banner, that it's just an honor to lead. And to the business community, in your hands, you have the potential to lead our economy. And to the educators, you have right in your hands, you have the potential to lead our future with the students that are coming out of your institutions. And to the military, you have in your hands, of course, to influence our freedom. And so this is a great day for us to come together because we love the subject of leadership. And if we're going to raise up men and women who consider it to be an honor to lead, there needs to be an environment. And in that environment of leadership that makes it conducive for that kind of a high-level scale, there needs to also be a commitment. And I would like to share with you, in fact, when I was asked to do this, I just literally began to write down just a couple of weeks ago thoughts I wanted to give to you. I've never shared these before in a leadership forum. But I think that they're important, and I want to give them to you because I think they apply to you, I think they apply to me, and I think they apply to the people that we have a desire to raise up the standard of leadership. So let me give them to you. Number one is for us to realize and exhibit an honor to lead. Number one, we need to understand, all of us need to understand that everything rises and falls on leadership. In 1976, I considered it my calling to begin to raise up and train leaders. And for almost 40 years now, that has been my total focus. In the books that I write, in speaking, and all the companies that I've started, it has always been with only one intention: to help raise up leaders. And the reason of that is because in 1976, I became convinced that everything rises and falls on leadership. In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, one of the laws is called the Law of the Lid, L-I-D. And the Law of the Lid just basically says how well you lead determines how well you succeed. That is a tremendous leadership law. Let me illustrate it with my hands for a moment. If this hand represents my business, education, military, if this hand represents how well John Maxwell leads, if this is my leadership lid, and this hand is my business, my organization, whatever, the law of the lid says that my organization will come up to the level of my leadership capabilities, but will go no higher. That literally my leadership will put a lid on the potential growth of my organization. That's why it's called the law of the lid. Now, the moment that you and I understand that, and by the way, that is true. I've been able to speak around the world. I've been able to speak at some of the greatest institutions and organizations around the world. And when I teach the law of the lid, I always challenge people to show me one time in government, show me one time in military, show me one time in education, show me one time in religion where an organization went beyond the level of the leader's capability and just continued to prosper and be blessed. And I've never had anybody be able to take that challenge because our leadership is the lid. It's literally the lid. So if we're going to lead better and if we're going to grow our organizations, we have to learn how to develop ourselves and become better leaders. Now, what is incredible is that's exactly what we can do. We can grow and we can develop ourselves as leaders, which brings me to the second point, is that if we're going to have, if it's going to be an honor to lead, we're going to have a passion, and that is a passion to grow as a leader, to develop ourselves as a leader, to get better. In 1993, I wrote the book, Developing the Leader Within You. It was really the first leadership book. It was a breakthrough leadership book. In fact, it sold millions of copies and sells more copies today than it did when it came out. But it was a breakthrough book because it was the first book that said that leaders can develop, leaders can grow, that leaders can get better, that leaders can improve. Up till that time, basically, people thought leadership was title or position. And so if they had a position or a title, they said, I'm a leader. If they didn't have one, they felt that they weren't. And because they had a title or position, they felt, well, now that I have this title position, I'm a leader. And they never thought about developing or growing themselves. And when I wrote the book, Developing the Leader Within You, I wrote it with the fact that you and I, we can grow as a leader. When I do Q&A, when I do leadership conferences, a lot of times somebody raises their hand. This is a question I'm often asked, and they'll say, John, are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born, I always give them the same answer. Of course they are. I've never met an unborn leader. and don't particularly want to either. I don't. That's not something I really want to meet. But what they're really asking the question, not are leaders born? What they're really asking, are there some people when they're born, they just have leadership gifts and they go to the front of the line, and other people are born, they don't have them, so they go to the back of the line? And of course, people have certain gifts, leadership gifts, musical gifts, math gifts. Of course that we're born with giftedness and an inclination, but what is so incredible is that anybody can learn to lead. And the reason that anybody can learn to lead is because the simplest but the most accurate definition of leadership is that leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. That definition of leadership has stood the test of time for centuries. It's influence. Nothing more, nothing less. And any person can learn to develop and grow their influence. And the more that people they influence, the more people they can begin to lead. I wrote a book a few years ago called The 15 Laws of Personal Growth. And it's a book that I'm so passionate about because what is amazing is that we can grow. Every person can grow. Every person can become a better leader. In fact, not only here in our simulcast studio here in North Georgia, but in all the satellite sites all around the world. I want you to do something right now. I want you to look at your neighbor and say to them, even you can learn to lead. Go ahead and tell them that, okay? Even you can. In fact, look right back at him and say, why do you think I brought you here? This is the whole purpose of the day. Even you can learn to lead. And the good news is that you can. In the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, another law of leadership is the law of process. And the law of process says leaders develop daily, not in a day. And so what we have to understand about leadership is that it's not a course, it's not a book, it's not a simulcast event. It's not like I go and kind of grab hold of it in one day and I walk away from this simulcast and I walk out and I look at my friends and say, I are a leader now, you know what I mean? No, it's a process. And many times when I'm with companies and organizations, they'll come and say, John, we just need more leaders, we need better leaders, and we got to do it kind of quick because we're kind of growing, and they have what I call, in business a lot of them, they have what I call leadership microwaves, where they got these microwave programs where they stick their leaders in and push some numbers and zap them. And that's why we have so many Pop-Tart leaders running around. And we need to quit zapping them and microwaving them, and we need to start crock-potting leaders. We need to understand that leadership is a beautiful thing, but it is a continual learning course. I thought I'll just write one leadership book because I really believe you can develop yourself as a leader. And when I wrote it, I thought that's good. But then as I kept studying leadership, I learned more. And then I wrote my second book on leadership and the next book on leadership. And 70 some books later, what I've understood is that the more you know that you don't know. And that this leadership is an amazing subject that you keep learning in and keep growing and keep developing in. Earl Nightingale, when I was 27, I heard him say these words, that if you'll spend 1 hour a day, every day, for 5 years on a specific subject, you'll become an expert on that subject. And you see, I was challenged to do that with leadership. That's how I began to write and teach leadership. I said, I want to become an expert on leadership. 5 years later, what I discovered is I really learned a lot and grew a lot in leadership. And the second thing I discovered is I wasn't an expert at all. And I'm still not. because I'm still a student. I still have a real teachable spirit. But if it's really going to become an honor to lead, not only in America, but around the world, if we're going to really lift up leadership, we need to understand that everything rises and falls on it. There's no way that you can ever develop anything great without it. And we need to have a passion to develop ourselves as leaders and to be the best that we possibly can be. Thirdly, if it's going to be an honor to lead, we need to be willing to lead by our example. I teach leadership all the time, and one of the things I share is this, that when you think of leading, you think of looking around and finding, okay, who will follow me? And the first question you ask as a leader is not who will follow me. The question is, will I follow myself? Because if you wouldn't follow yourself, why would anyone else want to follow you? And that begins with me becoming the person that I need to be, before I ever expect or ask other people to be the person I think they should be. So when people ask me all the time, they'll say, John, where should I start leading? Who should I start leading? I say, always start with yourself. Just start with you. That's where you begin. When I addressed the opening session of the United Nations a few years ago, understanding that I was having ambassadors from around the world, and understanding all the different cultures and all the different thoughts about leadership and how some came from dictatorships and all the different definitions, the mixed bag that I would be talking to that day, I asked myself, what can I say that can connect with every country, with every ambassador? And that day, I talked to them about 3 questions that every follower asks of their leader. Regardless of culture, regardless of country, regardless of time. Now, followers aren't sophisticated enough. You went up and said, what are the 3 questions you want to ask me as a leader? They're not sophisticated to pull them out, but when I share them with you, all of a sudden you're going to say, oh yeah, of course a follower would ask that question. Question number 1 is, do you care for me? Whenever a person's going to follow a leader, they just really want to know if that leader has their interest at heart. This is all about compassion and caring. I've often said, if you don't love the people you lead, you'll lead them wrongly. You'll manipulate them. You'll take advantage of them. Can you help me? If I get in line to follow you, and if you're going to lead me, is it going to get better? I mean, is my life going to get better a year from now, 2 years? I mean, can you help me? I mean, that's what leaders are supposed to do. Leaders are supposed to lift. Can you help me? And question number 3, can I trust you? Can I trust you? If I give myself to you, are you trustworthy? Will you do what is best for me? Will you do what is best for my life? Will you place me in a place of stewardship that I truly can trust you? That's a huge question. And that day, as I shared in the United Nations, I said, those are the questions, the 3 questions that followers ask leaders. And then as a leader, what do? You just turn the question around. You just ask yourself, I have to ask myself those 3 questions. Do I love the people I lead? Do I care for them? Can I help the people I lead? Can I lift them? Am I trustworthy? Can my people depend upon my word? Am I authentic? Am I a person that is grounded in trust and in character? You see, those are the questions I ask myself. And if we're going to make it an honor to lead, we're going to have to literally lead by example. I was recently in Las Vegas, and I was having lunch with Jim Collins, who's written, Built Alaska, a great, wonderful friend, terrific researcher, terrific depth and understanding of a lot about leadership. And no one has studied transformation and transformational movements more than Jim Collins, and this is something that greatly intrigues me. We have trained 6 million leaders in every country of the world, and now we're taking those 6 million leaders who now know how to lead, and we're asking now, can we take them to the next level, which is to become a transformational leader? And so I'm very interested in the subject, so I ask a lot of questions. And so I was sitting down with Jim, and I said, Jim, you've studied transformational movements more than anybody that I know, so I'm at your feet. I'm going to be your student. Teach me what I need to know. If you could say one thing about transformational movements and how it happens, Is there something that's just absolutely essential? He looked at me and said, no question, John. He said, if you're going to have a transformational movement, you have to have transformational leaders. You cannot give what you do not have. We teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. And that the only way that we can have transformation in a country or in a culture or a community is to be transformational ourselves. And we have been really committed in our organization, equipped to do this. In fact, in the last few years, we've begun to work in Latin America, as invited by the leaders, the presidents of countries, to come in and bring transformation into the country. So I was just last month with the president of Paraguay, 7 million residents, citizens, and he looked at me and said, John, we want you to come in and with the 7 major sectors. You got the government, you got education, business, media, arts, family, religion. He said, we want you to go to all of them, and we want you to do some leadership teaching and transformation. And we've done this before. And what we discovered is that when you want to go in and do that, the first thing you teach is leadership values. The first thing that you do is you help everybody understand what are the basic values of a leader. Because leadership begins not on the outside, it begins on the inside. And the way that leadership works is this: it works top down. It works with the greater influencers lead the lesser influencers. So it's a top-down movement, but it's also an inside-out movement. It begins on the inside. I've got to live it before I can lead it. And we also realize it begins small to many. It really begins in small groups of people. Mass movements never begin with the mass. They begin with a few. And so we teach round tables. We get 6 to 8 to 10 people maximum that spend maybe 8, 12 weeks just talking about leadership values. And what we teach more than anything else is that transformation always begins first with me. The first person that I need to change is me. In fact, when I do Q&A and leadership conferences, a lot of time people raise their hand. They'll say, John, what is your greatest leadership challenge? And I smile when they ask that question, because I've been asked it hundreds of times. I said, well, that's an easy one to answer. The greatest leadership challenge I have in my entire life is leading John Maxwell. Me. I am my greatest leadership challenge. You see, it's much easier for me to sit on a stool today and teach literally tens of thousands of people around the world in a simulcast. It's much easier for me to teach you leadership principles, but then I got to go live them. And isn't it much easier to teach them than to live them? Come on, talk to me. I mean, isn't it much easier to tell somebody else what they ought to do? And then sometimes it's disgusting. We have to go do it too. And what I determined, what I realized about leadership is that if it's going to be a real honor to lead, if it really is, that it's got to be an honor for us to live those leadership principles out, to be men and women of character, to be men and women that are trustworthy. You see, the whole solid ground of leadership is built on trust.